Welcome to a new episode from English Plus Podcast. Today we're going to talk about the orchestra. We will talk about orchestras from around the world, the sections of a symphony orchestra, the conductor, and the kinds of orchestra. So without further ado, let's start talking about the orchestra. The sound of an orchestra playing is a thrilling experience. An orchestra is a group of musicians who play musical instruments. Some orchestras have more than 100 musicians. Yet, when they play together, the orchestra sounds like one mighty musical instrument. Most of us think of a symphony orchestra that plays classical music when we hear the word orchestra. But there are other kinds of orchestras in different parts of the world. Indonesia, for example, has the gamelan. The gamelan is an orchestra made up of drums, xylophones, gongs, chimes, and other percussion instruments. In Russia, a balalaika orchestra includes many different sizes of stringed instruments called balalaikas. The instruments in a symphony orchestra belong to 4 different groups. These groups are known as the string, woodwind, brass, and percussion sections. More than half the instruments in an orchestra belong to the string section. The instruments in the string section are violins, violas, cellos, and double basses. The violin can play the highest notes of all the stringed instruments, so the violins often play the tune. The violins are split into 2 groups known as first and second violins. The woodwind section is usually made up of flutes, oboes, clarinets, and bassoons. The woodwinds sometimes carry the melody. The sounds of the woodwinds also blend and contrast with the sounds of the strings. Some composers have written music for additional woodwinds such as the piccolo, bass clarinet, or double bassoon. The brass section is made up of French horns, trumpets, trombones, and a tuba. The brass instruments play loud peaks in the music and impressive solo passages. The most important members of the percussion section are the drums. Orchestras usually have several kettle drums. Each kettle drum sounds a different note when it is played. Other percussion instruments include the snare drum, bass drum, cymbals, xylophone, and triangle. The percussion instruments are used to produce loud sounds and to emphasize rhythms. In addition to these 4 main sections, the symphony orchestra often has extra instruments such as a harp or a piano. Now let's talk about the conductor. The musicians in an orchestra have to play together. A conductor stands in front of the orchestra. He or she directs the players with hand movements to keep them in time. Most conductors hold a short white stick called a baton. The baton makes it easier for the players to see the conductor's movements. The conductor decides where everyone in the orchestra will sit. The usual seating arrangement has the string section at the front. The violins sit to the left of the conductor. The violas, cellos, and double basses sit to the conductor's right. The woodwind and brass section sit behind the strings. The percussion section is at the back. There are different kinds of orchestras. A symphony orchestra plays symphonies and other classical music at performances called concerts. An opera orchestra accompanies the singers in an opera, which is a drama where words are sung rather than spoken. Ballet orchestras play the music for a kind of dance called a ballet. Opera orchestras and ballet orchestras have the same sections as symphony orchestras. A standard symphony, opera, or ballet orchestra has about 100 musicians. So that's all about the orchestra. Now we will talk about a couple of keywords that we need to focus on and learn the meaning of from this episode about the orchestra. But before we do that, let me remind you that you can find a lot of exercises you can use to practice the things we're learning here on our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. There's a link in the description that will take you to the custom post we created for this episode. You will find interactive activities, a PDF downloadable worksheet, the text itself, so that you can practice the things you're learning here. If you want to take your English to the next level, take the link, go to our website, and you can choose the exercises you like the best. We create a lot of exercises. Of course, you don't have to do all of them, but we give you a lot of variety so that you can choose the things you like, the things you enjoy the most. But the most important thing is that you will get a chance to practice the things you're learning here, to practice the words, practice the listening, and we have some other kinds of exercises I'm sure you will enjoy and benefit from. And there's another thing. There's also another link in the description of the episode that will take you to our Patreon page. If you like the content we're creating and you would like to support us, become our patron on Patreon. Help us create more episodes and reach more people with your help and support. And now let's get back to what we want to do and talk about the keywords we can find in this episode about the orchestra. The first word is thrilling. We said the sound of an orchestra playing is a thrilling experience. Now, thrilling is something that is very exciting and enjoyable. Then we talked about the word mighty. We said when they play together, talking about the orchestra, of course, the orchestra sounds like one mighty musical instrument. Now, mighty is used to describe something that is very large and powerful. And then we talked about the symphony. We said most of us think of a symphony orchestra that plays classical music when we hear the word orchestra. What is the meaning of symphony? Now, a symphony is a piece of music written to be played by an orchestra. Symphonies are usually made up of 4 separate sections called movements. Then we talked about the different sections of the orchestra. We talked about the strings, and the strings are the section of an orchestra which consists of stringed instruments played with a bow. We talked about the woodwind section. The woodwind is the section of an orchestra which consists of woodwind instruments such as flutes and clarinets. Then we talked about the brass section. And the brass is the section of an orchestra which consists of brassed wind instruments such as trumpets and horns. And then we talked about the percussion. And the percussion is the section of an orchestra which consists of percussion instruments such as drums and cymbals. Then we have the word split. We said the violins are split into 2 groups known as first and second violins. Now, if something splits or if you split it, it is divided into 2 or more parts. Then we talked about the word conductor. We said a conductor stands in front of the orchestra. A conductor is a person who stands in front of an orchestra or choir and directs its performance. That's the conductor. And then we talked about the thing that he holds, the short white stick that's called the baton. A baton is a light, thin stick used by a conductor to conduct an orchestra or a choir. Then we talked about the arrangement. The usual seating arrangement has the string section at the front. Now, an arrangement of things, for example, flowers, furniture, and in our case here, musicians, is a group of them displayed in a particular way, and in this case, seated in a particular way. And then our final word for today is the word accompany. We said an opera orchestra accompanies the singers in an opera. If you accompany a singer or a musician, you play one part of a piece of music while they sing or play the main tune. So these were all the words I wanted to focus on from today's episode. I hope you like what we talked about. You learned a thing or two about the orchestra, and you learned a couple of words you can use in your own speaking and writing. With that being said, let me remind you one more time that you can take your English to the next level if you take the link we will leave in the description. That will take you to our website, EnglishPlusPodcast.com. You will have all the exercises you need, a PDF downloadable worksheet with its answer key, everything you need to take your English to the next level. With that being said, this is your host, Danny. Thank you very much for listening to another episode from English Plus Podcast. I will see you next time.